Welcome to Wannabe Clutter Free, formerly Wannabe Minimalist, the podcast for busy families who are tired of the chaos, fed up with being overwhelmed, and ready to enjoy life again. Each week, we talk about how to let go of the clutter so that you can focus on the things that actually matter. And it's not just physical clutter, we talk about the mental and emotional stuff too, because if it's holding you back, it's time to ditch it. I share what I've done in my own life to declutter, organize, and calm the chaos, but you won't just hear it from me. There are amazing guests too. It's practical, doable, and simple for those of us that want to be clutter-free. Well, hey there, my friend. Welcome back to the show. My name is Deanna Yates, and you are listening to episode 227 of the Wannabe Clutter Free podcast. On today's episode, I am chatting with Sarah Horgan about how her stage 4 cancer diagnosis changed her perspective on perfectionism and people pleasing, and how it impacted her approach to decluttering. We dive into how minimalism has continued to help her as she has become a mother as well. It is a powerful conversation, and I want to say thank you so much for joining me today, but also apologize for my strained voice. The week I recorded this, I was diagnosed with both bronchitis and pneumonia, so talking was difficult. So, thank you so much for sticking with me. The conversation is definitely worth it, and I am now on medicine, so I'm starting to feel a lot better. But can you do me a huge favor? If you do enjoy this episode, can you please subscribe to the show so you don't miss out on any future episodes? And go ahead and share it with a friend too. I would really appreciate it. But honestly, I just thank you so much for being part of our community. I couldn't do it without you. So if you want to join in on the conversation, reach out on Instagram. I am at Wannabe Clutter Free, or join our private community over on Facebook. It's the Wannabe Minimalist family group over there. All right, that's enough housekeeping. Let's learn about my guest today. Sarah is a full time working mom and wife who lived with clutter and found her way to the other side. She radically changed her own life after a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. Forced to examine everything, including her perfectionism and people pleasing, she realized all the stuff, and not just that physical stuff, was standing in her way of living her life her way. Sarah lives in Toronto with her husband and daughter. She loves the outdoors and a strong cup of tea, and is following her dream of writing a book step by step. I will have links to Sarah's resources in the show notes, which you can find at wannabeclutterfree.com/227. Again, that's wannabeclutterfree.com/227. And now let's get to our conversation. Well, hi, Sarah. Welcome to the Wannabe Clutter Free podcast. How you doing today?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really great. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, well, I'm excited to have you. We have some mutual friends, and they have told me wonderful things about you, but it's nice to finally meet you myself. So, can you tell our listeners a little bit about you and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a full-time working teacher. I teach kindergarten. I'm a mom. I have a 6-year-old, and I also help support women to simplify their lives and just get more intentional about how they want to be living and what they want to be doing. And I'm sure you know, like a lot of times clutter really stands in our way of doing those things. So, yeah, that's largely what I do. I have a podcast as well, and that's really fun for me. And I love talking to people and having these like really amazing conversations about this stuff, because I think an ongoing conversation about these ideas just helps us get deeper and deeper into our understanding of ourselves and really make permanent shifts in how we live.
Yes, I love that. All right, but you have a pretty remarkable story. So, can you share the pivotal moment in your life when you realized that clutter, both physical and emotional, was standing in your way, in the way of living the life that you truly wanted?
Yeah, absolutely. 10 years ago now, actually, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. I had lymphoma. And that was like the first really pivotal moment for me. Of course, everything changed. I really examined the way I've been living, the way I've been thinking, my relationships, everything. And I made some really big changes. I also had a lot of time to myself because this was before I was a mom, and I was I was not working as I was going through treatments. And so I spent tons of time alone. And I watched so many TED Talks and I read so many books, and I really got into meditation and just like being really present with myself. And I started to dig into the fact that I was a perfectionist and like what that actually meant, and all the people pleasing that I did. And that was like the first level for me. And it's when I first read one of the minimalist books, Everything That Remains. They actually, I think they launched that book that year because I went to their one of their book events when they came to Toronto. And so I started to sort of examine stuff and started to get rid of things. But I would say it was more on a personal level, my behaviors that I was really digging into. And then fast forward to becoming a mom, and I was like a full time working mom. And I just could not manage everything. Like I was just tearing out my hair. Like, how am I supposed to work full time, be a present parent, keep things tidy, and just like be on top of everything? And I just felt like I was continually not on top of everything. And I was always like scrambling. There's piles of things everywhere. It's never fully clean. And it was just really stressful. And I just started getting rid of stuff. And I didn't feel like I had a lot of stuff, but I think that honestly, we can feel that way. And the reality is, like, we all have way more stuff than we actually realize. That was like, I would say motherhood was really the final push to getting me to really deeply get rid of things, get really serious, and also start to connect like, hey, this stuff that I have, or, these things that I bought, or these piles that are waiting here are all connected to something like inside of me and like a feeling I have about myself, or a thought, or something I'm worried about, or, my scarcity, or whatever it is. So that was really the big push for me, was motherhood.
I can relate to that on so many levels. But first of all, congratulations on being cancer free. That's wonderful. And then you said there something about your own behaviors. Can you dive a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah, for sure. One is I used to be somebody who would take free stuff a lot. If somebody was like, do you want this? I would be like, sure, I could maybe use that. Or, yeah, that'd be good to hang on to just in case. And yeah, and I grew up like, my mom and I love to go to garage sales together and thrift things, and, very like resourceful. And so I think it was a piece of that, but also what I started to recognize what it was like, a sense of scarcity, like, oh, this is free and I might not actually be able to buy that, but I could hold on to it. And then when I need it, it's there. And sort of holding on to stuff out of the sense that, like, okay, it's there if I need it. And I had this moment, I remember this was like already once I was into minimalism and I had decluttered so much stuff. And I was driving home from work, and somebody had put out like a big framed photograph, a black and white photograph, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And so I stop and I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna take that home, I'm gonna hang it on the wall. Because where I live in Toronto, like, curb stuff is like, it's like normal. People just put stuff at the curb and it's gone in minutes. So I put it in my trunk and I drive it home, and then by the time I get home, I'm like, no, I'm not taking this, this is a wrong decision. And so I put it out at my curb, and then a few hours later, I look outside and it's tipped over and the glass has smashed everywhere all over the ground. And so I go out and I have to clean up all this glass, obviously, because I'm not going to leave it. And that was like a moment where I was like, oh my gosh, free stuff is not free. There's always some level of work, and it's not necessarily cleaning up broken glass, but that free things really take a toll on you. You have to maintain them or clean them or store them or whatever, or make a decision about it, even when we're so maxed out on decision making. That was one of them for sure, was my sense of scarcity around free stuff. The other thing that I really did a lot was have piles of things like, okay, I'm going to get to this, take this to the store, or whatever it is. Like, this needs to be repaired. And I'd have these little piles everywhere, but they were really just like clutter, because it was things like visual things that I had to do that I wasn't doing. And it was stressful to me to look around. Oh, you haven't repaired that yet, or you haven't. And like those little things, like, I just need to sew, a seam on those pants, but it sits there for 3 months and that kind of thing. So I really had to get better at like decision making and taking action. Like, it was like, are you going to fix those pants? No, then like put them on the Facebook group and see if somebody wants them and they want to repair them, or, donate them, or whatever it is. Like, and if you're going to do the craft, you're either doing it like tomorrow, or you put the stuff away and get it out when you're going to do it. So that kind of thing, those were the big ones for me. I think was like this constant to-do list that was just like visually around me all the time of things like I wanted to be doing, but like didn't necessarily have the capacity for. And then like taking all this free stuff and feeling like I need to like hold on to things.
Oh, those are two major ones. Yeah, that visual to-do list of guilt and just right. It's almost like you don't write it down, but you're like, if I just keep it here, I'll remember. But then it's not remembering it when you want to remember it. It's remembering it on its timeline when your stuff is supposed to help you. You are not a slave to your stuff unless you have too much of it and it's out and about. And that's kind of what it makes me feel like. I feel like a slave to my stuff when it's talking to me and it's like yelling at me, like, hey, hey, I'm over here. Hey, remember me? You said you were going to do this thing. Now, don't you feel great about yourself? No, you don't. You feel terrible about yourself because you're not doing the thing that you said you would do. So, yeah, I absolutely love how you said that, though, because it is hard to put that into words about like, why does this stuff make me feel so bad? But it's like you said, it's that visual to do list. So, when you first embraced minimalism, what was the hardest part of letting go? And how did you overcome it?
Yeah. So I was a really sentimental person. I realized about myself, like I lost my father and my brother when I was younger. And so I used to hold on to everything. As a teenager and like a young adult, like if there was like a scrap of paper that like somebody wrote on, or like a coaster from somewhere I went, or those kind of things, like I would just hold on to these little like almost mementos of things. And I had bins of stuff that came from my mom's house, and just like old journals and diaries and medals and toys and just everything. I really was like sort of a collector of things, and it was very hard for me to let go. But there was a couple of things, like one, I had a summer job and I worked for this when I was in college. I worked for this company that downsized seniors, and I didn't actually really make this connection until maybe like a year or so ago, but I loved that job. And what I would do is I would go in and I would help seniors like sort through all their belongings and pack them up and decide like what they're going to keep, what they're going to donate, what they're going to sell, and what's garbage. And help them go through that process. And when I did that, I used to go home and like start to get rid of things because, I would often be in someone's house that had like newspapers piled up to the ceiling, or like, people who lived through the Depression era who like washed every plastic bag and like folded them in drawers, and like every twist tie is like straightened out and laid out neatly, and just like even little stuff that we toss all the time was like cared for and kept. So it was a huge amount of stuff. So that was one thing that helped me, was actually like seeing other people's clutter and helping them go through that. So that's sort of a unique experience. But I think that, just really going through the process of then later when I had cancer and like recognizing what's really important, and, who you want to be and how you want to live. And I think when you start to connect to those things and thinking about like, is this what I want to, like, is this how I want to live? Like, do I want to look around and see this stuff all the time? Do I want to feel this overwhelmed all the time? Do I really want to like hold myself up to this standard of like perfectionism where, I feel like I'm never actually hitting the mark? And so I think that like the combination of like the experience I had and doing this deep work really helped me to start to see like stuff isn't a person. Stuff doesn't really represent memories necessarily, and that there's other ways to hold on to people that don't involve things. And then I would say finally, like the action of actually getting rid of stuff and feeling the lightness that comes from living without things. And you don't have to necessarily start with like your most sentimental items. Like that's not where I began. But like clear out your bathroom and feel like, oh, I actually only need one bottle of shampoo. And having that one bottle of shampoo in the shower feels so much better than all those products I had before. And just having the experience of living with less and the practice of letting go, I think is like really, really transformative. Like once you try something out and you take action doing it, and then you're like, hey, I can do this, it feels good, and you build your confidence. I really think that just the like combination of those things really helped me.
I love what you said there. You called it a practice, right? Something we do on an ongoing basis. It's not a one or done. It's not, it's not this moment of just ripping off the band-aid and then everything's perfect. Because I think we grow so much as we try, as you try something on, you dip your toe in a little bit, you think, oh, okay, I really liked that. Or, oh, that didn't feel great for me. And then making adjustments along the way. So I love how you called it a practice. And I probably jumped ahead of myself a little bit when I asked you to talk about, when you first embraced minimalism. I think I'm looking at your space and I'm looking at my space, and they feel similar to me in that we don't they're not stark white walls. I mean, I have a bunch of pictures on my wall and you have some pictures too. So how would you define minimalism? Because I think sometimes that can be a little scary for people, just that word.
Yeah, 100%. I think sometimes when people hear that word, they, like you said, they have a reaction to it, or they think like that is like restrictive, like there's a set of rules or an aesthetic that goes along with that. And I don't agree with that at all. Like I think minimalism gets to be yours on your terms, and it can change all the time. It's funny, like my daughter and I just like decorated for Halloween yesterday because we had started this wreath and just like a craft project. And so like, like I said, and being committed to like not leaving these things lying around, we finished the wreath. And so then, sort of pulled out, like I don't have a lot of decor, but I this year it's so fun for her. And so we did get a few extra things. And so I think that's where you have to sort of weigh what is enough for you and what becomes overwhelming. If you have tons of pictures on the wall and it feels really cluttered to you, and dusting those things and maintaining them feels overwhelming, then have less. But if you love having your wall filled with photos of people or art or whatever it is, and that's fulfilling to you, then have that. And I think like you decide what is your capacity. Is it like, where does it become overwhelming and where does it give you joy or fulfillment or function? Like when you're on your couch, if you love having lots of pillows, then have lots of throw pillows because that's comfortable for you and it feels good to you. But if you're somebody that like you look at all those pillows and you're like, oh my God, like that's too overwhelming to me, I don't want that, then don't. And so I think that it's like building the confidence in decision making and knowing that you get to create your home and your space on your terms, and letting go of other people's ideas of what things should look like. And I think like, if you don't feel confident around creating your space, and, we all look to inspiration from other people, you can start to like think of a lot of shoulds, like reality shows and magazines and that sort of thing. Like, how many times has there been like a list in a magazine, like 10 must haves for fall or whatever it is? And so you think, okay, I need to have like a wreath on my door and, these seasonal throw pillows and, all these kitchen utensils, or that little black dress or that blazer or whatever it is that you feel like you should have because somebody else has told you that. It's, I think, more about like connecting to who you are, what your life is, how you want it to be, and then making decisions around that. And then when you get to your capacity, saying no more, or I'm going to trade something out, or, like this is too much for me. And I think that capacity changes in seasons of life too. I certainly have had a greater capacity for things than I do right now, like parenting and working and my business. These are the things that I'm like are taking my time and I'm choosing to put my time towards. If I want to give more time to something else, then, or, if I move and I live in a different space, like that might change. I think just like maintaining flexibility around minimalism as well. Yeah. Like I think capacity, flexibility, and knowing what it is that you want.
Hmm, love that. Well, and like we were saying, like, so one thing with pictures, right? I have a whole wall full of pictures, and those are the people that are important in our lives. Those are our friends and family and things we've done together, but I don't have them on any flat surface. I don't have frames on flat surfaces. So for me, I have the capacity for a wall full of pictures, and they're all in matching frames and they're all laid out in a pattern, but I don't have capacity to have individual frames on flat surfaces where, you know, I just can't do. So, right, like you said, just figuring out what works for you and what feels okay really makes a big difference. And it doesn't have to look like anybody else. It can look just like how you want it to look and what feels good for you. And then asking yourself those questions like, is this okay? Does this feel okay? And just taking a moment of reflecting. And it doesn't have to be anything that's like, it doesn't have to be this hour-long moment of like, "Okay, does it feel okay?" It's just like, just gut check. How does this feel? What do I think about this? When I walk in the house tomorrow, I'm gonna look around and see, how do I feel when I walk in? What is the first thing that stands out to me as the rub? Like, what's the first area where I'm like, "Ugh," or where's the first area where I'm like, "Ooh, love it," you know? And just starting to get into that intuition a little bit more.
Yeah, and then like you said, like you then I think your ability to make quick decisions, the more you make decisions, the easier it is to make decisions because you're more confident around it and it comes more easily. So it's like again that practice and just like, doing it and saying, "Okay, I'm going to make a decision about this." And it's okay to make mistakes too.
Totally. Absolutely. I think you can't learn without mistakes. And let's talk about, well, first off, you are a kindergarten teacher. So I'm sure that is part of your everyday life of helping little kids learn from their mistakes. And we all make mistakes. And I think that's how we all learn. One of the best ways to learn, actually. But let's talk about how you balance all of the things you've got going on. Full time working mom with living an intentional, clutter free life. Like, let's talk about that balance a little bit and maintaining simplicity in a busy house.
Yeah. So again, I would say it's a practice and it changes. Sometimes it changes on a daily basis, sometimes on a weekly basis. But number one, I have certain routines and I rely heavily on certain routines. And some of those I make decisions about. It's conscious decision making, it's intentional decision making. Like when I think about the day ahead, sometimes I'll swap out a routine or say, I'm going to let that go for today. But I generally do laundry every single day and I just find that's like chipping away at things, like, doing small steps. It's like my number one strategy for everything is just like, what's the next step? What's the next step? Not thinking too far ahead all the time if I'm in, a really busy day or, those days where you have like, okay, this is happening and then this and this and this. It's like, okay, I'm focused on the one thing right now and then I'm going to go to the next thing. So I do laundry every day. I exercise every day generally, and that's because it gives me lots of energy. It's taking care of my body and it really takes care of my mind as well. I am not somebody who really, I actually am generally a positive person and I don't really feel a lot of anxiety. I'm sort of fortunate in that way that the way my brain works. But, doing exercise on a daily basis really helps when those things do kind of come and just sort of generally helps boost your mood and approach the day with a positive mindset, I think. So I would say the laundry and the exercise are the two things that like hardly ever get put aside. But I do other things like I practice gratitude and meditation, which again, like I've sort of chosen these practices intentionally because they're very fulfilling and they give back a lot. The energy gives back in the exercise gives back in energy, but the meditation and gratitude is like the mindset part. So I think when you have like a clear mind and you can see what you want and you feel good, then it helps you go through your day and do the things that aren't always your favorite or, do take your energy. So I would say like those are big. And then I'm generally a very organized person. That comes easily to me. Like since I was a kid, I always loved organizing and like Martha Stewart. I just like loved her. And, I want to know how to fold a fitted sheet. Like that was the type of person I've always been. Yeah, I think there's things that come naturally to me. But yeah, I think like maintaining the organization of scheduling things or making a list or mapping it out and then figuring out like what's the smallest step or what's the first step. I think that those things really help. So it's like a combination of like taking care of yourself, working on your mindset, and then having like some systems that help you. So you figure out what it is for you that's going to help like give you that productivity boost. I think too is the other thing with the laundry. Like I read somewhere once that like when the dishwasher's running, like the sound of it makes you feel productive because you have something going and you've done something. So I think that the laundry thing is kind of like that. Like if I'm home on a weekend, I get up and that's the first thing I do. I go down to the basement and I throw in a load of laundry while the kettle's boiling. And then it's sort of like I think you sort of like touch and go and you like check in with yourself because it's not like you set it and then forget it. Like with all of this stuff, it's my intentionality has looked different over the last few years and it's gone up and down. I also, actually, the one other thing I'll say is I get up before my family so that I have some quiet time before the day starts because that has a huge impact on my day. If I just snooze the alarm and wake up at the same time as my daughter, I mean, yeah, the day is just a different thing.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one for sure. Because, yeah, by myself waking up early, and it doesn't even have to be that much earlier, but as long as I am up a few minutes and I can start my coffee or I can just do one little thing, I mean, go to the bathroom in peace, even like it doesn't have to be anything crazy, but now I'm in the driver's seat. I made the choice. I got up and I am in control of my day versus someone else being in control of my day. Now, on the weekends, when it's a little more flexible, I love those mornings when, I can sleep in and she can come snuggle in bed with me. Like, that's great. But on a regular basis, yes, I always try to get up first because it does. That's a huge one. And then also, I just that idea of figuring out little routines that help give back. So thinking of it like as you were talking, I was just thinking of this like cycle or this like circle that just kept going around and it was like this self-fulfilling little loop that kept happening, right? It's like you do the thing and yes, I get it. Like we don't necessarily want to work out. We don't want to necessarily do the exercise, but pick something you don't mind doing or make it something like I have to go to the grocery store. There's a grocery store not too far from my house. Well, why don't I walk to the grocery store? And so now I get my exercise and I do the thing. And, so if there's something like that that works in your life, that's the first thing that popped in my head right now. But just like having this cycle that continues. And so I start something, it works better, like it makes me feel better. And then I want to do it again and do it again. And just like you said, with all the little decisions we make, with all the things that come into our house, and having these moments, these small moments of these routines that we do, and I love that idea of the fact that the washing machine makes you feel more productive, and it totally does because it feels like a cheat, right? It kind of feels like, "Oh, I'm doing this thing, but this other thing's really happening and getting done for me." I mean, so silly, but as you said it, I was like, "Oh, that's totally true. I can totally see that."
Yeah, totally. And I think like, there is an element I will say when it comes to like establishing these routines of pushing yourself too. Like it's, you're deciding like, okay, I want to be doing this. Like I want to be exercising because I know that it's good for me and I know it's going to have these benefits. But like you said, you're not always going to feel like it. And so you can do things like you said, the walk or whatever. But, like I'll just choose like a slightly shorter workout or like an easier workout on the days that I'm feeling sluggish because, I know a workout is better than no workout, but and I tell my clients this too, like you really have to like push yourself in the beginning and commit to it and say, I want to be doing this. And there's going to be those little feedbacks, but that when we're going after change, it's not always going to be super comfortable. And our brains like things to be the way that they've always been. So you really have to make your brain recognize, hey, we're actually going to like this. We just have to work on it.
Yeah, that is so good, right. you have to work against your own brain and know that your brain is just trying to protect you. It's just trying to stay comfortable. And that's, I think, where a lot of that just in case clutter comes in, right? Like, but I might need this someday. I don't want you to have to go out. I don't want it to be difficult for you later when you had this thing and then you're like, oh, why did I get rid of it? But you have to understand that we live in a day and age where I could literally pull up my phone, go to an Amazon app, find anything I need, and have it on my doorstep in 2 days. And there is nothing on this planet other than food that I cannot live without for 2 days. Food and water we absolutely need. The other things, aren't really needs, they're wants. And yeah. All right. Any last things you want to tell anybody that's starting out? Like if someone's just starting to simplify their physical space, or maybe they're trying to get better with this mental part you were talking about or the emotional well-being, what advice would you give someone just starting out?
I would say just start and like start to take action in small ways. Like we talked about earlier, like you're not going to be tackling this in a week or a weekend, and let go of that idea. I think, I've said this many times before, but I think like reality TV kind of like messed a lot of us up in that regard, expecting these like transformations. And I'm not going to say that they never happen because, of course, there are people who like do that with their life and that's amazing. But I think for most of us, especially in a season of motherhood where we're taking care of others and we're balancing a lot of different things, that the reality is that if you go into the bathroom and you're brushing your teeth and you pull open a drawer or open your vanity and you make a few decisions about something like, oh, that nail polish is really old, I don't need those pills anymore, I don't like the way that face wash smells, or whatever it is, and you just get rid of those things, like you've already done it. Like you've done something today. When you go to get dressed and you pull out a pair of socks and there's a hole in them, like, well, get rid of them. Like there are so many easy decisions that you can make, and you can make them throughout your day, and they don't have to be like in a set aside time for this. That's like that perfectionist, like all or nothing thinking that I used to get trapped in all the time. And it prevented me from doing so many things. Like I can't even tell you the amount of things that I just like didn't do or stopped doing because I felt like, oh my gosh, I can't do it this way. And so if you can just figure out like the small ways that you can do it, your kids go to get their coats on and you're like, oh, that's last year's coat, I'm going to donate that. And if you have a lot of stuff and this is a very overwhelming thing for you, don't worry about like selling stuff, because I think that's another thing where people get like caught up and they're like, oh, but I could sell this. But then you're like having this stuff hang around a lot more. Like I used to do that a lot and it was great when I was on like maternity leave and I had all this time. But now I don't have the capacity for that anymore. I do it occasionally, but like most of the time I'm like, asking a neighbor or, trying to find somebody for it to go to, or put it at the curb or drop it off at the donation center. Like there's just no need for you to make yourself go through the process of trying to like make money from your stuff. You've spent the money, it's gone. Like just work on getting your peace back, and by taking some small actions every single day. I think that's like the easiest way. And the more that you get into it, the easier it becomes. And some days you'll be more motivated than others. And you'll have this burst of energy where, like, I'm going to do like these 3 drawers in the kitchen instead of just making one decision. But just go with the ebb and flow of how you're feeling. And then it never becomes something that's like super overwhelming to you. It becomes something that's like sustainable that you can do consistently. And that's how you're going to make the most impact.
So true. Yeah. I mean, even I don't like to even call design shows reality TV because they are not real. Like, I mean, they're just not real. I love a good house show, though. I've been watching Love It or List It a lot lately just for ideas and inspiration. And that's my background at the moment, which is funny because I don't generally watch those shows a lot. But I also Googled about the facts of the show. And I'm going to spoil it. If you love the show, put on your, earmuffs for a hot minute. None of it is real. Absolutely none of it. I mean, yes, they do the renovation, but the issues are staged, of course. They know about all this stuff before they start. And half the time, they don't even sell the house. Half the time, the houses they go into aren't even for sale. They will record both endings of Love It and List It, and then just put whichever one works best for the show. So it's not real. Like, I mean, that's the thing. Like, we have to, and it's still wonderful entertainment. I still really enjoy the show, but it lets that pressure go of like, oh, this is what life should be like, or this is real when you're like, no. And then I'm always wondering, like, do they actually keep the furniture that she comes in stages? Because it's not the same. It's a completely redesigned with beautiful interiors. And so if they don't get to keep any of that furniture, well, I want to know what it looks like in 6 months when their old furniture came back in. And it's not that we can't buy this stuff and we can't have these beautiful things, but we also have to understand that's a huge change, and none of the stuff they had in their house before they started is still there for the camera roll at the end. So, just let that pressure go. I'm just like, it's okay. Like, it's okay to enjoy these things for entertainment, but don't look to it as something that you necessarily should strive for. And that should be your reality, because that's not real life. And no one actually lives in that house when they're showing the cameras, right? Like, they move out for 7 months. And so nobody actually is living there. So you don't know if there's systems in place and if it would actually work for a family that comes back into the space. So just take it all with a grain of salt.
Totally. Yeah. And you get to make your space your own. Like it's really about making it work for your family. And if, you need to have like baskets for, I don't know, like I think like sometimes we think like certain things need to go in like certain rooms, but like I've seen people put like their kids toothbrushes in the kitchen because there's like a bathroom near the kitchen, and that's like the space that makes sense for it to be there because after they finish a meal or whatever, like before school, that's like where it makes sense for it to be. So I think like let go of like prescribed ideas and make it work for you in the way that it functions for you.
Oh, that's interesting. I love that idea. So where can people find you? Because I know that they are going to want to connect and, get more information about you. And then you mentioned right as we started this that you are starting a new online membership community as well. So tell us a little bit more about that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first you can find me on Instagram is where I'm most active at Simple Intentional. I have a podcast as well, which is the Simple and Intentional podcast, so you can find me there. And yes, I'm actually launching a membership tomorrow. I don't know when this episode will air, but that's like the beginning of October. And it's called the This Intentional Life Community. And I've been working on it for a while. And basically, the idea is to bring together women so that they can connect with each other and support each other and learn from each other. And in the sort of vein of letting go of perfectionism in light of life lately. I mean, my audience knows my mom passed away recently. And so I have really had to go with the day by day of life. I had a vision of how I would share this membership. And now I've just decided that I will just be putting it out there and sharing it as is, and no fancy launch or anything like that. But I think that that's very much in line with how I teach people. I really want people to be authentic. I want them to take action and not get too hung up on how things look or how you think you should do them. So you can go to my website and find out more about that if you're interested.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, we'll make sure we link to everything in the show notes. So we'll make it real simple for everybody, simple and intentional. Make it easy. So I love that. All right. Well, my favorite way before you go is to ask every guest 3 rapid fire questions. And so my first question is, what does clutter free mean to you?
I think clutter free means not having anything around that isn't serving a purpose, isn't functional, or isn't something that you love in your home. I think it means that you can tidy up easily, that you can put things away with ease, and that when you're in your home, you feel a sense of peace, or that you can quickly arrive at that sense of peace because things are easily tidied and easily put away. And that you're able to build decluttering, I think, into your regular life where you're continually making decisions about your stuff.
So good. Never heard that last part at all. So that was really fun. I like that. And number two, what is making you happy right now or in this season of life?
Like I mentioned, my mom passed away, but she was in the hospital for a couple of weeks leading up to that. So it's really been a season of life where everything's turned on its head. But I found this delicious new tea that I love. I'm a tea drinker. I don't drink coffee. And it's a beautiful cream of Earl Grey by this company. It's called Genuine Tea. If you're a tea drinker, I highly recommend it. So I've been having a lot of tea lattes, and I don't even want to know how much I've spent on tea lattes this past month. But just that little simple thing has really been a nice thing in life lately.
Aw, I love that you found something like that. So beautiful. And number three, what is a goal you have for yourself this year?
My goal this year is to really build This Intentional Life community into like a great place for women to be a part of, for them to learn and grow and support each other. Something that I have always wanted more of in my life is community and community with women. And I talk to so many women who feel this way. You know, I think our world can be a bit isolating sometimes. And so I just really want this to be a place where people can come and feel connected, and it's fun, and they're learning, and they're getting a lot out of it, and they're building their lives in the direction they want to go. So that's really going to be my focus this year.
So good. So good. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing such great information. I know everyone's going to want to connect to you. So thanks. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Well, that was a good one, right? Sarah has lived through some tough stuff, and her spirit and resilience is just amazing. But I would love to know what you thought of this episode and our conversation. So if you want to comment or join in on the conversation, you can come on over to the Wannabe Minimalist family group on Facebook and join in there, or you can join me on Instagram where I am at Wannabe Clutter Free. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you can continue to get decluttering and organization inspiration sent to you weekly. And thanks again for making this show part of your weekly routine. Of course, special thanks to Sarah for joining us and offering us such amazing advice. I will be back here next week when I will be chatting with Kate House about living by design. That sounds like a fun topic. So until next time, let's keep things simple, keep thinking clutter free, look inside to see how you can bring more simplicity and intention into your life, and please remember that I believe in you. I know you can reach your goals. I'm Deanna Yates, and you've been listening to Wanna Be Clutter Free. I'll see you next week. Cheers.